Welcome to the Plant Cunning Podcast,
where we explore a relationship to plants, other people, and the mysteries of nature.
Coming to you from the high Allegheny Plateau in central New York.
We are your hosts, A.C. Staubel
and Isaac Hill. Well, hello everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Plant Cunning Podcast. Today we have Gananathamritananda Swamiji, who is a Swami, Ayurvedic practitioner, astrologer, and pujari who lives in Virginia. And we have a very interesting conversation with him, going over things such as the problems with sourcing Ayurvedic herbs, problems with building a temple for a Hindu goddess of herbs in rural Virginia, the Flexner Report, and lots of other very interesting things. You can find him at somamata.org, and check him out, find his books and how to support him. And then if you would like to get a Vedic astrology reading with me, you can email me at info@plantcunning.com. And if you'd like to get some tinctures or salves from AC, you can always go to travelingherbfarmer.com. And as always, we appreciate when you like, subscribe, comment, share, and also join our Patreon, which is basically just a tip jar. But thank you for being here and watching or listening to this podcast. So I hope you enjoy the episode. Okay, so we have another episode of the Plant Cunning Podcast, and today we have Swamiji. Let me try Gananathamritananda. Is that close?
Pretty good, yes, close.
How do you say it?
Gananathamritananda.
Beautiful. So how are you today? How are you doing?
Good. Very good. How are you guys?
We're doing awesome.
Yeah, it's a beautiful spring day. A little cold, but spring is fully here, so we're happy about that.
Yeah, our little puppy Percy is very happy too. He's back here with a ball, like, come on, let's go.
So how did you get that name, and how did you become a Swami? What is a Swami?
Okay. Well, Swami is a Sanskrit word that could be translated in several different ways. Perhaps the most common translation is master. And it's a name that they would call all sorts of people potentially in India. Any sort of teachers, some housewives will refer to their husband as Swami. Traditionally in that culture, you wouldn't refer to the husband by their name. And so they might call the husband Swami. And the thought is God is in everyone. And you look to your wife as a living goddess. You look to your husband as a living God. So, but a lot of times teachers of spirituality in particular, but teachers of other subjects may be referred to as Swami. Swami is also a name that would be given to ordained renunciates. And I actually, years back, was trained and took initiation into the 10 lineages, the Dashanami Sampradaya of Shankaracharya. And so took vows as a renunciate and wore orange and lived that way for some time. But then my gurus asked me to marry, which is not traditional for people who are sannyasis or renunciates. And so at that time, I stopped wearing the orange.
I see. So you were a renunciate, like that's how I usually see what I hear of as Swami is a renunciate, but it is more of a general term too. Is what you're saying?
Yes, definitely. There's a lot of teachers have been referred to as Swami who I think have not officially taken those vows and even live as householders.
So can you tell us a little bit about what like a day in the life for you as a Swami? And I mean, you also have a lot of other interests like Ayurveda and growing herbs and teaching and all of these things. But what's a day in the life for you, like these days?
These days,
Yeah.
we're just after the COVID and after moving to the new property in the mountains, a lot of times we're just doing things to try to make ends meet.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people doing spiritual work, working in herbalism, things like this, people who've been doing it for a long time are struggling now.
Yeah.
Because people have less money now. The prices for everything
Yeah.
have gone up. And so, especially with herbalism and things like this, people can't use their health insurance and they have less extra money to spend on these things. But also during the COVID, when people were asked to stay at home, I think a lot of people got very comfortable. The government gave them those checks and they said, this is nice. I can just stay at home. I don't have to work. And they started thinking, how can we extend this vacation? How can I do a job from home with no qualification, no certification, no nothing? And no state in the United States requires us to have any kind of certification to practice herbalism. So that's one thing that a lot of people have started to try to do to make money from home. And so there's a lot of competition. One of the biggest Ayurveda schools in America recently has been bought out because they couldn't afford to stay in business. They've been doing it for 30 years and they're huge.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I guess the format has changed a lot too. It's like everything's online now.
Yeah, that's happened as well. And I think that a lot of people who've been able to reinvent themselves and pull people in online have remained more successful, but that's becoming more difficult as well. You have to pay Facebook for ads, or people, they hide your post. No one will even see your post.
No.
Yeah, we have to study how to make TikToks. Start making TikToks. Yeah, I thought.
Yeah, we used to do YouTube years ago, but I think that it was easier in those days. They didn't expect a high quality professional video like many people are expecting today.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so you're moved to a new property. Are you growing herbs there?
Not so much here, not so much at this property. This is an interim property.
Mm, okay.
The last property we were growing there, we had plans to plant 108 fruit trees over several acres, and we planted about 54 of those. But we were encountering difficulties with the county. We were also working to build a temple there, Hindu temple, and I think that's a lot of the difficulty. Our neighbors were very conservative, sort of fundamentalist Christians, and were very opposed to the idea and very vocal about it and calling the authorities on us. But we had trouble with the teas and the fruits as well, that they told us that we weren't allowed to farm our agriculturally zoned land because tea was not an agricultural product in that county, and that fruits were not an agricultural product in that county.
That's
just tobacco and corn. Yeah.
Yeah, not even so much tobacco anymore, maybe a little bit. But I asked them, I said, what are the agricultural products in this county? And they showed me a list. It was all Monsanto crops.
Yeah.
They said, you need to grow something more traditional like corn or soy. And I said to them, I said, yeah, because after the Boston Tea Party, they were drinking high fructose corn syrup and soy sauce, right? Instead of herbal teas.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. 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 Well, times are definitely changing right now. But I guess one of the main questions that we start off these shows with is what brought you to the plant path too. So you've been trained in Ayurveda among other things, but what got you interested in working with plants in the first place, and what was your training like?
Well, as a child, I was more aware of the feelings and communications from plants and animals than it seemed other people were around me. And I really connected much better with the plants than with people.
Yeah.
And I was very interested in herbs and spices, in cooking and in healing and all that kind of thing. And I would get like encyclopedia of herbal medicine and read it cover to cover
Nice.
like a novel and reread it and reread it. And I had like hundreds of books like that I had read and almost memorized. And so when I was about 17 years old, I didn't really need a job. I didn't need anything. I didn't want anything. I was living with my parents, going to high school. I didn't really need anything, but they were encouraging me, be responsible, go get a job. So I looked in the paper and I saw like my dream job. There was this bean soup company that needed a person for blending the herbs, just a herbal specialist. And I was like, oh yeah, And I went in there and I was so excited and so enthusiastic and going on about how like this is so awesome, the herbs, that they thought I was being insincere. He said to me, "You must really need a job." And I said, "No, I really love herbs. This is like absolutely true." And so they didn't give me the job.
Are you serious? That's so bad. That's funny.
I,
That's
I was crying, but I went on to start my own herb company. So no
cool.
beans.
That's
But then later I got into the Ayurveda because the Western doctors had given me some medicine that caused kidney failure.
Mhm.
And they told me I would die at that point. Likely I would die.
wow.
And I said, "Well, I'm young. I'm like 20. I don't like that thought. You're fired." And
Good.
I started to look for other solutions. And somehow I came to Ayurveda, and I learned that any condition is potentially curable within Ayurveda. And I should be insulin dependent now from type 1 diabetes, but that's been cured entirely with Ayurveda.
Right.
And
That's the
needless
one
to
you're not
say,
supposed to be able to cure, right?
yeah, incurable in Western medicine, difficult to cure in Ayurveda, but possible.
Mhm. So I did hear on another podcast about how that healing happened. Would you mind sharing what the process was and how you got to the root of that issue?
There's always many different layers and levels with disease. So a lot of it was dealt with spiritual practice. Some of it was dealt with herbs. But I started reading about Ayurveda and trying to do what I could. And I realized that doing the right thing could make me feel bad because it was going to clear the toxins out of the body. It was going to bring up these subconscious, unprocessed mental impressions. So I might start feeling emotional as a result of doing the right thing. But also doing the wrong thing definitely would make you feel bad too. And so I was having this problem as I was trying to teach myself, thinking, well, I don't know if I'm doing the right thing or the wrong thing. I was like, please send me a teacher, Lord. And then a few days later, I found a flyer from my teacher who had been practicing in California, but too many other people were trained now in California, and younger, cooler sort of people. So he was struggling to have a practice in California. Still a struggle, I think, for people to practice Ayurveda full time in this country. So he had come back to Virginia, where he was from. And so I met him there. And after a while, he said, you're really doing so much. You've done a lot of lifestyle changes. You're doing a lot of spiritual practice. You're taking all the herbs. I would expect to see much more improvement than we've seen. And he told me a story about himself, that his teacher had told him something similar and sent him to the Vedic astrologer. And this Vedic astrologer was very good. The astrologer looked at his chart and said, "You were married twice. Your second wife had an abortion. And the soul of that child got caught between realms, and you're now possessed by your unborn child." He did a puja for the child to help the soul to move on. And he said he felt a lot of dark energy lift off of him after the ceremony. He started weeping uncontrollably, and he felt much lighter after. And then his condition started to improve. So he sent me to the same astrologer. That astrologer passed a few years back now. But he looked at my chart and he said, "You have a female relative within a few generations who died a tragic or untimely death having to do with fire." And I didn't think this was the case. I had been studying genealogy with my grandmother a little bit, and I had never heard of this. So I told him that. I said, "I don't think so." He said, "Well, it's definitely true. So maybe ask your other grandmother." I asked her, and sure enough, her grandmother, exactly 4 generations before me, had been living in San Diego at a orchard for orange trees. And it gets a little too cold in San Diego for the orange trees. And so they keep these little pots around the tree that they build a fire in. They call it a smudge pot. Apparently she burned tending to the smudge pot. I don't know if she burned up completely or what. Apparently she wasn't buried, caused her soul to become upset. And just I was susceptible karmically or whatever at the time I was born. She came in. And so he was able to notice that and do a ceremony to help her to move on. And that really helped to ease things and help to start things to shift.
That's incredible.
Yeah, an amazing story.
Yeah.
And it's also amazing that like, well, in this culture we don't have that, you know. There are certain things you just can't see with Western diagnostics at all, you know.
Certainly.
So how was your Ayurvedic training and how did that blossom for you?
Well, I'd say it's all interconnected. As a part of the Ayurvedic healing, I was practicing mantra and meditation. So I'd say I've learned a lot from my gurus. And then I'd started studying astrology, not so formally as a student with either of my teachers, but learning from observing them and conversing with them a little bit in a more traditional way, not like a classroom setting. But so the learning astrology was a part of it. And in that time, I was reading the astrological texts, the traditional texts in English, in Sanskrit. I taught myself Sanskrit so that I could read them. And I was chanting them and meditating on the meaning and spending a lot of time doing spiritual practice. My teacher of Ayurveda was good, but I don't know that there's many people with really that thorough of a knowledge of Ayurveda. They have the treatments in Ayurveda called the Panchakarma,
Hmm.
5 different treatments. They'll give you one or the other, or maybe several of them. And there's a whole process beforehand to prepare your body for cleansing. And then they do the cleansing therapy, and then you've got to give your body strength to come back from it. It's a very intense process. And there's a lot of potential complications with that kind of treatments. My Ayurveda teacher was encouraging me to do these treatments. And I think he should have realized probably if he was trained better or more knowledgeable that I was too weak and too thin
Hmm.
and probably shouldn't have been attempting these at all. But what kept happening because I was so weak and my condition was so intense was that I was getting all these complications. And so I learned a lot about the Ayurveda by experiencing things going wrong. And then, like, it's like I'm reading in the text and it says, okay, so if we're doing like the therapeutic enema, putting the herbs in oils,
Mhm.
therapeutic enema. And so I'm reading, if you do it and it's too hot, it will force the doshas to go up in the toxins or whatever to go up into your heart. And then it will be like this, and that can be fatal. And the cure for that is this. And I could never really get myself to try to do it again on that same day because I was terrified.
Yeah.
And so I want to give my body some time to bounce back a little bit. So I'm like, well, I hope I don't die. They say this one's going to be fatal, and tomorrow let me try to do it again.
Yeah.
And then I'd have some issue. It's too cold, or it stops and starts too much, or too high, so too much pressure with the enema bag. And so
Mhm.
I got a full range of all these different complications and learned from that experience a lot about how the treatments work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes you learn from your teachers, yeah, the ways that things don't work, or maybe the things that you don't want to do, as well as the things that you want to do.
Yeah. Yeah. He was very helpful, though. I mean, he gave me a lot of good advice and guidance, and he always just encouraged me and
Mhm.
encouraged me. And that
Nice.
was helpful because I would have never done certain things and wouldn't have been able to learn without that encouragement.
Yeah. But
Yeah, it's
so
good.
you were kind of learning all these things together, the astrology, the Ayurveda, and then doing the practices, doing the chanting and studying Sanskrit and
Yeah.
yeah.
Uh-huh. And to me, it's very much all connected.
Mhm.
In earlier times, you didn't just practice astrology, you'd also do the ceremonies to do the remedy, and you'd have to have knowledge of Ayurveda to be able to tell the right remedy. And you couldn't just do Ayurveda for the same reason that people could be blocked. You couldn't have a cure with medical treatments if the cause of the condition is spiritual.
Right, right. And you
Hmm.
got to be able to see those spiritual blockages and the bodhika and so on. Yeah.
So, are there some ways that Ayurvedic practitioners are in the West are like doing it wrong? Or are there common mistakes for Ayurvedic practitioners that you see in the West with the way that they're using herbs or the like certain protocols?
Well, more and more they're watering it down. And that's
Hmm.
the biggest issue.
Yeah.
They're taking away some of the essence, and who knows what it will turn into. They've done it to yoga.
Mm.
Yoga, which was a spiritual tradition to connect you to the divine, has become nothing more than an exercise for most Westerners. They did it with Tantra. They've done it with the word mantra. Mantra is now an affirmation. It's not a
Yeah.
mystical incantation with
Yeah.
power to do things around you. It's just an affirmation, and not even necessarily a positive affirmation.
Mhm.
So I'm a little bit afraid to see what happens to Ayurveda as it keeps getting watered down, and the spiritual essence is being stripped away and the healing power is being stripped away. But what I could say to comment on that, and it's connected to a project that I've been working on for years and talking about a little bit for years, but really want to push to get completed soon, which is a book on Ayurvedic pharmacology.
Mhm.
Because whether people have studied a little Ayurveda or not, Western people have no real sense of the medicines, the range of medicines and the way they're used in Ayurveda. And so it's I've worked with some stores that were trying to build an Ayurvedic section, because Ayurveda is more and more becoming a buzzword.
Mm-hmm.
And if you put the traditional Ayurvedic products that are very powerful, if you know what to do with them, very useful, people don't buy them.
Mm.
People will buy a single herb that they've heard of as like a superfood or something, like ashwagandha
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
or turmeric or whatever. Mukuna is another Ayurvedic herb from India. It's a superfood now. Or shilajit, which is really a terrible thing to see happening because that's completely non-renewable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Traditionally, Ayurveda would not use a single herb. Usually, they'd use an herb as a part of a formula. And the complexity of the system of creating these formulas is mind-boggling to most
Mhm.
Westerners and even Western herbalists. People have to train for 4 years to become a pharmacist. They can't prescribe, they can't diagnose, just to be able to make these medicines and to give them to people and tell them the instructions for the right amount to take and that sort of thing. It's extremely complex, but it's very powerful herbal medicines that they're making
Mhm.
through these techniques. But and it's a postgraduate degree. You have to
Yeah.
have an undergraduate degree to even apply to this program. And so compared to what's happening more and more now in the West, especially with people starting up after the COVID, we have people that they've seen a YouTube video or they read a blog post, and now they know how to make a tincture, they know how to make an oil, and they make that and they sell it, and they don't necessarily have much more knowledge than that. It can be very dangerous when people are practicing with the herbs without knowledge, because people don't really view herbs as a powerful healing substance. But they're very powerful. Herbs can kill you if you eat the wrong herb.
Mhm.
I've seen more and more people giving very bad, very dangerous advice for herbs. I remember right after Roe v. Wade was overturned,
Mhm.
people were getting upset, understandably. Women were feeling like they were losing their freedom, their autonomy. And then I saw everyone sharing this crazy post. Don't worry about this. Roe versus Wade, you can take a gallon of Queen Anne's lace. That was the recommendation. And I've got a lot of issues with that. I mean, number one, you don't want to be giving herbs to induce a miscarriage unless you really know what you're doing, because
Mhm.
there's a great chance of complications.
Mhm.
There's a great chance you're going to kill the woman, not just the child, even if you're using the right herbs and know what you're doing.
Mhm.
I can't really speak to whether Queen Anne's lace is a safe or decent herb to use. I don't know anything about that really, and I haven't really tried to figure it out either. But I can speak to the fact that it's not a good idea to tell people who are not botanists to go out and find Queen Anne's
I
lace.
know that's right. It's so close to poison hemlock.
Yeah, and grows in the same places potentially
Yeah.
as poison hemlock. And hemlock is one of the most deadly herbs on
Yeah.
earth.
Mm-hmm.
Socrates took a tea of it to kill himself. But then beyond
The
that,
seed
what
fruit.
does that
Yeah.
mean? A gallon? What
Right.
does that even, a gallon of what?
Yeah.
A
Not
gallon of a tea that you've made, or is it a decoction, or is it what is, and a gallon, which part of the herb?
yeah.
They didn't tell that either.
Oh
You
no.
take a gallon of the seeds and eat it. You fill up a gallon milk jug with the seeds and eat it, or what? Some people would argue that a gallon of water to drink in a day is potentially too much and
Right.
potentially dangerous for some people. So a gallon of some herbal substance, but we don't even know how strong it is or what part of the herb it comes from. Very, very dangerous recommendation.
Yeah, the internet is a pretty scary place for herbalists who know what's what. It's like, there's things being written by AI. People are saying like
Yeah.
in specific directions, like, oh yeah, herbal abortions, that'll be easy. But yeah, that's right. It's like Queen Anne's lace. It looks like one of the most toxic plants. So, and which like one bite of poison hemlock can kill you. So yeah, that is pretty scary. And I love that people are like using herbs and trying to make their own tinctures at home, trying to watch videos to make their own infused oils if they're like doing it in a safe way. And like, you know, it's nice that people are like interacting with the plants and they're building their relationship with the plants. But having a teacher, there's just something so important about having like a in real life or even online teacher that you can ask questions to and and figure out like what is true and what is not true from the sea of misinformation about herbs on the internet.
Yeah, there's a lot of people just writing stuff. And I mean, they don't have that practical experience of working with people, giving them the herbs. It's hard to get people to take the right herbs
Hmm.
because when you take the right herb, it will start clearing out your body. It will start clearing out your mind. And my Ayurveda teacher worked with mainly women because men don't want to look at their emotions. They don't want the effect of the herbs, whether it cures their cancer or what, they don't want to look at things.
Mm.
It's difficult when people are so accustomed to these Western medicines that kind of suppress the symptoms. They want that. They want an immediate relief from their symptom. And that's not the way herbs usually work. It can take them
Yeah.
more time and you may get worse before you get better.
Yeah, what are some of the major differences and similarities that you see between the Western system and the Ayurvedic system, and maybe speaking a little bit to like the history?
The Western system, I think, in a lot of ways has been lost, unfortunately, in a lot of ways. And that's not to say people aren't recreating it, but
No.
I was amazed when we moved out to the mountains, to Appalachia, that people here are still very much having faith in herbalism.
Mm-hmm.
They're practicing astrology, they're planting by the moon. I've seen multiple people out here dousing with a stick
Mhm.
for stuff underground.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
They believe in ghosts, they believe in spiritual forces. They believe in magic and rituals and things, and they believe in herbalism, but they're using modern products that you buy off Amazon, and they're using colloidal silver and things like this. It's not really a part of traditional Appalachian herbalism.
Mhm.
I think that, and even 20 years ago, when things were not so popular as they are now, maybe there were 20 or 40 years ago, some people who had been practicing their whole lives out in these mountains still practicing, but I'm not really seeing them. The people I'm seeing around now practicing and teaching in the mountains are also incorporating in Chinese medicine concepts and Ayurveda concepts, and they're using Ayurvedic herbs. And they don't know what the native herbs around here do, like the trillium, the birth root, or the beth root, and the black cohosh and all that kind of thing. There's so much confusion about it. People know that the blue cohosh may cause a miscarriage. And so they confuse then blue and black. And now people think the black cohosh will cause a miscarriage.
Mhm.
Years back, I remember that, we've been taking Solomon seal and false Solomon seal for a long time and replacing some very rare Ayurvedic herbs with them and formulas and having great results with both. But I remember years ago, people were saying Solomon seal is perfectly safe. False Solomon seal is cathartic and possibly very toxic. You should never touch it, never eat it. And now it's just the opposite. Now, when I search online, people are saying false Solomon seal is perfectly safe, but Solomon seal has been found to have some chemical compound in it.
Mm.
So that one's not safe and you may not want to eat it.
Mm.
And I think a lot of the early books on herbalism, a lot of it was hearsay. So, well, we heard that the Native Americans of this tribe were using this herb for that. Who'd they hear it from, though? Did the Native Americans tell them? Were they lying to the guy who's the cousin of who gave all their friends and family syphilis blankets? We don't know. But people have lost faith in the tradition, and I think the tradition has been lost. The Western herbalism used to be a lot like Ayurveda. They had these different constitutions,
Yeah.
bile and phlegm and all this kind of thing. But even by colonial times, by the 18th century, they were not really practicing that system anymore. But it used to be very, very much like Ayurveda and the Greek system was, and that's what they were practicing until very modern times.
Yeah, and there are some people bringing that back and looking at the elemental and the energetics and the humors and using astrology too, because like that was a thing. Like traditionally, the doctors knew astrology as well as herbalism until about the 1700s. So I see that coming back, but it is there's a lot of reconstruction happening as well.
Yeah, I think for people who are trying to do that, it's a good idea to learn living and very complex system like Chinese medicine or Ayurveda to have some framework to work within as you recreate, and then you can find parallels and
I agree.
probably do a better job of recreating these systems.
That's
But
why I started studying Vedic astrology, because I'm learning Renaissance astrology, and there's a lot there, but without like the lineage, it's hard to put things in the right place. And having a whole system that comes from a living lineage, you kind of see how things fit together a lot better.
yeah,
So
spiritual systems and even healing is very difficult for us to understand, very difficult for us to learn on our own, very difficult to recreate because it always deals with something that's beyond our scope of vision.
mhm.
A sick person can't envision the life or the state of consciousness in which they're well. And they can't necessarily envision the path or find the path to get there, or they'd be well.
Mhm.
So they're limited by the disease. They're limited by the layers of ego and ignorance and the veil of Maya that prevents them from seeing things as they are. It's very difficult unless you have someone who has seen beyond that veil who can help to guide you in stripping away the right pieces.
Wow. Yeah.
Especially because the ego will protect itself. That's just its nature.
Yeah. Like sometimes when people get like a diagnosis, it can be like sort of a veil over them where it's like that becomes part of their identity. Is that kind of what you're speaking to as well?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's definitely a part of it. Yeah. A lot of people, they find a lot of benefit to being sick.
Hmm.
Mhm.
They want to be sick. They don't want to get better necessarily. They get people's sympathy, or they get time off from work, or they get disability check or whatever for being sick.
Hmm.
Yeah, and there's also that, like you're talking about how it can feel bad if you're taking the wrong thing, but it can also feel bad if you're taking the right thing. So if you just kind
Mm.
of do nothing and take the pharmaceuticals or something, then you're staying in that very
Comfortable.
comfortable middle ground where nothing's, you're just staying as you are without having to change.
Yeah, well, there's a concept in Ayurveda that once the doshas, the constitutions, get imbalanced, a person will tend to crave and tend to do those things that continue to imbalance that particular constitution. And that's
Mm.
because it doesn't make them feel the pain of their body purging stuff. It doesn't make them feel the difficult emotions. So there's that
Mm.
instinct to make ourselves comfortable.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really interesting. I'm seeing that eighth house of the chart, right? Right now it's like that unseen thing, that chronic disease, and it's also the house of transformation. That's where you need a practitioner who can help you through that eighth house situation.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm
That
I'm all
often can be true.
yeah, I'm interested in something you said just now about, well, a little bit ago, about how you are using Solomon seal and false Solomon seal in formulas instead of other more endangered herbs. Do you think you could talk a little bit more about that? Like what herbs are you using, and how are you? Because I think it's a really important thing for people in Appalachia and in the United States to do is like learn how to use the herbs that we have, that grow here naturally in the right way.
Yes. That's one reason I want to put out this book on Ayurvedic formulas is because back in the 1990s, they did a study and things have gotten much worse since then. The Indian government set up a committee or whatever to conduct this study, and they found that over 93% of the Ayurvedic herbs were threatened or endangered or critically endangered in their
Wow.
wild habitat in India due to reckless overharvesting, unsustainable, completely unsustainable. The problem is in India, it's very expensive to get land and to farm the herbs, but labor is really cheap. So they just pay someone to go out in the forest and grab the herbs, and people are greedy. They're grabbing as much as they can. They're not doing it sustainably. And so we're in a very real situation that in the next 20 or 30 years, all the Ayurvedic herbs could be gone. And Ayurveda, since the 1990s, Ayurveda has become much more popular in India, and it's becoming more popular in America. And even in America, it's even worse because they're not using a tiny pinch of the herb as a part of a formula with 50 herbs in it. They're taking that one herb as a superfood that someone wrote a book about, and not so big of a deal with turmeric. Turmeric's very safe. That's why they put it in all the food. Turmeric's generally pretty mild and helpful in a full range of different conditions. It's usually, it's not too potent either in one direction. It's not going to unbalance you too much. And it's very common and it's cultivated. So it's not endangered. But when we're talking other herbs, like even shatavari now is threatened or maybe endangered in its natural habitats in India due to this overharvesting. And so that's a problem. As Ayurveda continues to get more and more popular, people are not doing this sustainably. They'll sell as many herbs as they can to make the money, and they don't care if the herbs all disappear. And so people in America are hearing of the Ayurvedic herbs and they want to get it, ashwagandha or whatever, tulsi. And so
those are easy to grow too. You can grow those pretty easily. It's like we grow those,
Absolutely. Yeah. They're both fairly easy to grow. And they'll grow in places a lot of other things won't grow very well. But, there's no reason that we can't use the concepts of Ayurveda to understand the healing properties of the herbs and use herbs that are abundant. And Ayurveda is big into use what's local because that's going to connect you with the land where you are.
Yeah.
There's no reason that we can't use the native herbs here and even make traditional Ayurvedic style formulas out of these herbs and really empower these herbs and empower our healing by connecting us to nature where we are. Typically, if you want to make sure that you're getting sustainable herbs from India, if you're getting herbs that come from India, the way to go is to get certified, USDA certified organic. Because in India, there are laws, there are regulations, but they're not strictly enforced, and you can bribe everybody and all this kind of thing. So and people lie. People are very shady in business in India. For example, when they sell dal, they'll put rocks in the dal intentionally because the rock is free and the rock is heavier than the lentil. And so you'll get more money for the rocks, and people are breaking their teeth eating this stuff, but they don't care because they're getting more money for doing it. Business is very shady, and they'll tell you whatever they think you want to hear. Oh yeah, it's sustainable. Oh yeah, it's organic. And there's a lot of stuff that's organic out of India. But the thing with USDA certification is it comes from beyond India, and you can't bribe those people. And so you can trust that it's at least cultivated.
Yeah.
And not wild harvested. Then you know that it's sustainable.
Right. Okay.
And so there's some major companies in the U.S. that I want to commend for ensuring that anything they get is certified organic, like Banyan Botanicals and Organic India. They've been doing it for a while, but more and more you're seeing certified organic out of India as well. And if it has that symbol, it's USDA certified. You might want to check it. There might be people putting a fake symbol. But that's the way you know you're getting a safe herb. But the herbs that we're talking about that I was substituting, there's a group of 8 herbs called the Ashtavarga. It's used in many formulas, and they're very tonifying, very strengthening. And some are some relatives of the Solomon seal, some are some lily family herbs, and they're very rare and very endangered in India, and they're substituted for even in India typically because they're so rare. And they might use shatavari as a substitute for them. But we were using lots of native, mainly rich wood sort of herbs, like black cohosh type herbs or the wild yam and things like that. Or even kudzu is a good one. It's an invasive, if you can find the root of it, which can be hard to accomplish.
Hard.
Yeah, and then there's the problem even in the Appalachians in the US, there's overharvesting going on with a lot of those rich forest herbs too.
Except for kudzu.
Except for kudzu, yeah, that's why I was going to do kudzu.
Everyone should be
to some extent, I don't think from what I've seen that there's that much concern yet at this point for those herbs. But we intend to try to plant those herbs and kind of wild simulated growth in time when we get back to a proper property. But we're at an interim place too small and the soil's not real good, and so we're not bothering amending the soil and all that. We're just working to get back to a suitable place for everything we're doing.
Good. Yeah. We grow the ashwagandha in our greenhouse because here in central New York it's like it can grow outside, but it'll not be as big. And the greenhouse, we can control how much water it gets and things, but it grows pretty well. And we usually get a few gallons of tincture and then some for drying. So just stoked about that.
Yeah, they can do well. If you can give it an early start, definitely does better. Yeah. Shatavari is a little harder. They like to do a second year root for shatavari, but you can do it. You can get little roots.
Oh, okay. Maybe I should try that.
They're not quite as good, but they're fine. Oh. You can get decent within a year.
So that also talking about the land project. What is your vision for your land project, and who is Shakambhari, and what are you looking to accomplish?
Well, we're working to build a temple for the goddess Shakambhari, the goddess of the forest. She's a form of goddess Durga. She's a goddess of nourishment. She relates to herbs, relates to all plants. There's a story that there was a drought and people prayed, and she came in that form and cried tears of like pity or something for the people, and it rained for 9 days, 9 nights, and then all the vegetation came back. So she relates to all plants and fruits and vegetables in particular, and healing herbs and forests. And so it just seems like a very important aspect of divinity for people to reconnect with now that could be very beneficial at this time. But the thought is also to have a forested area and then collection of plants, native and Indian, to teach people about the uses of plants and help people to reconnect to nature, help people reconnect to these older traditions that are being lost and forgotten.
Do you envision growing some of the Appalachian, native local plants as well as some Indian plants?
Definitely. Yes, cool. Definitely.
Awesome.
We're doing work as well to help to preserve some of the heirloom varieties of fruits and flowers and heritage breed animals and that sort of thing. But definitely a mixture of all of those. And in this book on the Ayurvedic formulations, I'm going to list every herb that's potentially threatened or endangered from India, with a whole range of possible Western herb substitutes that we could use in those formulas.
Yeah. So the goal is to have a temple for Shakambhari. Yes. And what's that process like?
It takes a lot of time, a lot of planning. Energetically, you've got to prepare the space, but then we've got to raise the funds to build the building, but then to do all the rituals to consecrate the place. And that could be equally as expensive as construction of a building.
Interesting.
And we've had the difficulty that the last 2 properties we got, we were chased away by the conservative Christian neighbors.
Oh. Yeah, that's always that can be an issue. Yeah.
That can be an issue even for a Christian church. People don't necessarily want it in their neighborhood because it's extra traffic on a Sunday or whatever, extra noise.
Right.
So it can be difficult anywhere to start any kind of religious place of worship.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. But especially if it's some weird foreign stuff they don't know, they get all up in arms
Yeah.
about it. But
From the
they're
time
called.
they came with guns and chased us away with guns, we couldn't even call the sheriff because the sheriff was friends with the gunmen.
Yeah.
The time they came with guns, they told us, "You're talking about building a temple for a Hindu goddess, and we're not okay with that." They said, "Even if you told me it was a Hindu god, we might be okay with that. But if you pray to a goddess here in our neighborhood, we'll shoot you."
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's so layered of
Yeah.
complex bigotry right there. Like, wow. I'm sorry. It
Yeah,
sucks.
well, it's okay. It comes with the territory. And
Yeah.
that's a part of the work we're doing is clearing the pathway so other people can do this kind of thing more easily in the future generations.
Yeah. So
Beautiful.
why Virginia?
That's where I was born.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
The mountains here are beautiful, and I think they
Yeah.
need it here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
People have said, why not go to California? You'll have a lot of support there. Well, they have a lot more temples there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They don't need it as much there. They need it more here, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think so too.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of I remember stories of the spiritual tradition that I'm been associated with for since I was like 20. It comes from a fellow named Richard Rose who had a self-realization experience when he was 30, like in 1940, something like that. And he lived in West Virginia, and he had some major problems with his neighbors as well. In fact, actually, they came shooting at him too, but he's from West Virginia, so he shot back. But then he got the Hare Krishnas moved in, kind of got a foothold for them, and then they bought up all the land around. So you said that they were better neighbors than the rednecks who would steal your catalytic converter or whatever. But yeah. So it's a process, and that was many years ago. That was 50 years ago, over 50 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's only possible to even attempt some of the things that we're doing because of the things that people did before us. And there was one
Yeah.
realized master here in Virginia who's even buried here. His Samadhi shrine is here
Hmm.
in the Shivananda lineage.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah, that's a whole other can of worms to open up is because we do interview people on enlightenment and
Right.
the spiritual path as well, because that's part of what I'm interested in and what our audience is interested in. But from your perspective, and I mean, there's so much more we can go into, and we don't
Mm-hmm.
have that much time. But like, what is that the spiritual path from your perspective, and what is the goal of the spiritual path, and is it attainable in this life?
Just to know yourself,
Hmm.
to know yourself. Yourself is the same as the source of the universe. Yourself pervades the entire creation, but we don't see it because we identify with the body, the senses, the mind, and this concept of who we are. I'm a man. I'm a Ayurvedic practitioner. I'm a this. I'm a that. I'm 20 years old. I'm 30 years old, 40 years old, whatever. We identify with all these, not necessarily entirely false, but more limited aspect of who we are.
Mm.
It's like looking at just some little strength of your true nature, like your finger, and identifying with, oh, I'm just my fingertip. And really, all the rest. We're missing out on the rest of our nature. And so the mystical teachings from all the different traditions help to lead us back to knowledge of subtler levels of who we are and leads us back to reconnect with nature, our essence, which is pervading nature. It is nature itself.
Mm.
Yeah. So how do you realize that for yourself though? What's that? How does that happen?
Well, it's possible for anyone, definitely, but you have to strive sincerely.
Mm.
You have to possibly sacrifice things that you think that you want from this limited sense of who you are for a greater good. And ideally, you find a teacher who can empower that process because it's usually not possible for the ego to destroy itself. It's bound by that fight or flight instinct that the animals are bound by. We're animals as well. We're bound by that. We defend that even though the ego is a false construct,
Mm-hmm.
we defend it. We defend its life
Yeah.
instinctively. And it's not really typically possible to, even if you learn all the practices and mantras and techniques, you're going to tend to do it in a way to preserve the ego. But the energy of a teacher, well, even just seeing the teacher shows you that it's possible.
Yeah.
You see the teacher doing some things that you think, well, I didn't know someone could do that.
Yeah.
I couldn't have done that. You find yourself inspired by these great masters. But then also energetically, just the presence of the teacher helps to break through. It helps to lift you up beyond these things that otherwise, these forces you're bound by.
Yeah.
Mm.
I use the analogy sometimes of a dog that's leashed, or chained to a tree or something.
Mm.
The dog can only go as far as the chain allows it to go unless someone comes and undoes the chain for the dog.
Yeah.
It's similar to that situation. There may be some amount of freedom, but we're bound a lot by this ego.
Yeah. And all those hidden beliefs and that are behind all the decision making, all the decisions that we do. It's hard to uncover those. Even through self-inquiry, it's hard to see your blind spots. It's hard to see your own 8th house or your own 12th house.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
Definitely. It's hard to read your own chart, period.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's hard to have any clarity about something that you're emotionally connected to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You need that clarity to be able to see what the right way to interpret any chart is.
That's why every herbalist still needs an herbalist.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah.
Sometimes hard to see your own health issues from a pragmatic way, and just having another outside person be like, have you tried plantain on that skin thing? And you're like, oh yeah, plantain exists. Like you're just panicking and you can't figure it out. But yeah, so it's good to have outside perspectives.
Yeah.
Get past the ego and get past the blind spots.
Definitely, it can be helpful. Are you guys aware of how that the history of how we moved away from using herbs in the early 20th century into making the pharmaceuticals that are used now?
Well, I'm familiar somewhat, but I think it would be good to talk about it. Yeah.
I think it's a very interesting subject to me, because especially the way that medicine is talked about in this particular country. What I'm getting ready to say is going to sound to some people like conspiracy theory, but this is documented history, and you can look it up and verify everything that I'm saying here. In the 1890, 1891 or so, they passed the Antitrust Act.
Mm-hmm.
And this affected John D. Rockefeller and his oil holdings. He had a monopoly. They broke up his monopoly. They broke up the oil company into about 39 different companies. And he's trying to figure out how he can make more money selling his oil. And Andrew Carnegie, steel baron, is figuring out how he can make more money selling his steel. Up until this point, we're using herbs for medicine. Herbs and medicine is synonymous. But in around 1910, as a response to this, Carnegie in particular hired a guy named Flexner to construct a report called the Flexner Report. Flexner. You can Google it, you can look it up. The Flexner Report, book-size report on the standard of medical education. And they were reporting to the government and saying, a lot of the medical practice is unscientific. But what is unscientific is all this herbs that you can pick in your backyard, but you can't patent it. What they were studying and finding is scientific was these new pharmaceutical medicines that can be patented.
Of course.
To this day, about 99% of the pharmaceuticals are made from petrochemicals, meaning they're being made from Rockefeller's oil. And they're being made in laboratories that rely upon stainless steel equipment and tables and stuff. So today, people say that the medical schools, the doctors are being funded, the medical schools are being funded, the research is being funded by the pharmaceutical companies. The FDA, Department of Drugs, gets 75% of their funding from the pharmaceutical companies.
Yeah.
And so in this country, and if you look on a source like Wikipedia, they'll tell us that herbs, there's no evidence for herbs, no scientific studies. There's thousands of scientific studies, but they're not published in the right medical journals. It has to be published in the medical journals that are funded by the pharmaceutical companies.
Mm-hmm.
It's mind-boggling. 99% of the pharmaceuticals are made from petrochemicals. You can Google it. You can look it up. And so as a result of this Flexner report, more than half of the medical schools were shut down. The ones that were teaching herbalism, they're shut down. The ones that will change and support the pharmaceutical industry, they were kept in business. Many of the doctors were jailed at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Although don't Google that way. Google it, were herbalists jailed as a result of the Flexner report, were chiropractors jailed as a result of the Flexner report. So people were put out of business, put in jail, who were practicing these natural ways of healing, herbs, diet, lifestyle, this kind of thing. Yeah, midwives, all these kind of things. And now we don't take any of that seriously. Herbs are sold in the supermarket as a food supplement, and people buy poisonous amounts of herbs and take it thinking it will do nothing bad to them. And we're claiming falsely that there's no scientific studies proving the efficacy of herbs. There's thousands of studies out of India, but we discount that because, the standard is low in India. It's not scientific. That's racism. But in Germany, there's a list. You can find a list of 200 herbs or herbal supplements that have been studied to our Western scientific standard and approved for the Western allopathic doctors to prescribe to treat health conditions alongside aspirin and antibiotics and all that. There's 200 herbal products approved in Germany, which the doctors prescribe to treat conditions. For example, lemon balm is approved in Germany to treat Alzheimer's disease. Do we hear of that? No. If you look it up on Wikipedia, they'll say herbalism is pseudoscience. They'll say that there's no scientific evidence at all. It's not even true. And we're hearing this because it's all the media, the Wikipedia is influenced by the pharmaceutical companies. They're trying to sell Rockefeller's oil.
Yeah.
So it's not that, and it's amazing what they've done with the oil, that they can treat so many things and out of one substance, oil, and they use other things too, but it's amazing. But think how much more they could have done if they weren't thinking so much about profits. It's not because they're more powerful, more effective. It's not because they have less side effects. It's not because they reverse the conditions more completely. It's because they make more money that we're using these. And that's why people are losing faith in herbs. And then our traditions are being lost of using the herbs.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and then there is that counter swing now too, where people are starting to realize that, and so they're coming back to the herbs. But that tradition has been watered down to a large degree, so they're, and there is that idea, that unconscious belief that herbs don't work. It's the same thing I think with spirituality. It's like spirituality isn't really real. It's just like we can summon this demon or whatever, and it's not really going to do anything. But it's because you don't believe that it's real that you can take poisonous amounts of herbs or some very unsavory beings. Yeah. I think those connected.
Yes, it's unfortunate. People need to be cautious with it. They need to have faith in it, but perhaps they need to see more.
Yeah.
To be able to have faith. With time, more people sincerely practicing, more people will see, and I think we'll continue to regain some of this connection to nature and connection to these natural healing systems all around us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm excited for your book, the Ayurvedic pharmacy book, to have, a trusted source of the Ayurvedic herbs that maybe I'm not as familiar with, but would like to be. So, and the formulas. I'm really curious about the formulas and how the herbs work together.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very interesting and very, very complex subject.
Yes,
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah. So this has been a fantastic conversation. I've
Yeah.
enjoyed it a lot. How can people find out more about you, get your books, help support your projects?
Just meditate. They can visit our website, somamata.org, somamatha.org. Is
Awesome.
it okay if I end with a prayer from the hymn to the herbs from the Rig Veda?
Are you serious? Yes.
Amazing. Yes. That'd be amazing.
Om Chadaya Samvadante Somena Saharagyaha Yasmai Karote Brahmanastagum Rajan Parayamasi. And that basically means may all the herbs come together with Soma, the king of the herbs, and proclaim to the Lord of healing that the herbs have the power to remove all disease and all trouble for the wise people who know how to use them.
Oh, beautiful. Thank
Beautiful
you
prayer.
so much.
Yes, you're welcome. That's just one verse. It's a whole beautiful hymn, big, long hymn to the herbs that they call them mothers.
Hmm.
We've referred to several times in the hymn as mothers because they nourish us, they support us, and we look to the herbs like a divine mother.
Mm,
Absolutely. Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you.
very beautiful. Well, thank
You're
you
welcome.
again.
Thank you for
Thanks for
having
being
me.
on the show. Enjoy the rest of your day.